Psychiatrists tell us that anger and hatred are destructive feelings that we need to get rid of in order to be healthy emotionally. That may be true, but how do you purge yourself of righteous anger and hatred? That was the question I needed to answer, and years of therapy didn't help me do it, but fate did. My name is Alan Easton. I was a pretty average kid in the large high school I attended in a medium-sized city in the United States. Although many girls at school told me that I was very cute and very nice, I was shy. I didn't date much, even though I lost my virginity in junior high. I was on the soccer team, and although I had the size, strength, and speed to be a starting midfielder, I didn't have the necessary dedication or mean streak, so I didn't play that much. My soccer coach was unhappy that he was never able to get the best out of me and kept saying, "You're too easygoing, Easton." My grades were always decent, but as with soccer, I wasn't dedicated enough to my studies to become an academic star. However, I did much better on standardized tests than my grades would suggest. This led to my teachers being puzzled as to why I wasn't doing better. "You're too slack," my physics teacher would often say. My mother died before I entered my teens, but my older sister Carrie was a strong female influence on me, and my father was an excellent father, so I had a good family life. Although Carrie was of average height for a woman, if strength was about body mass, she would be 400 pounds. Nothing intimidated or frightened her. My father owned some stock and worked as a service manager at a car dealership, so we were always in decent financial shape. Like most of the kids in my class, I planned to go to college after high school. However, in my senior year of high school, my plans changed when Janet Hatfield blindsided me. After a few double dates at the movies, as well as going to school dances and outings together, she truly captivated me. For the rest of the school year, I was happy as a pig in shit. My grades actually improved because my attitude towards life improved. Even my dad noticed and complimented my upbeat attitude. She made it clear that she expected a long-term commitment from me. Not shy about talking about her desires, she expected us to get married after graduation and start a family a few years after that. Janet was obsessed with the idea of eventually becoming a good mother. She wanted to leave her dysfunctional family in the rearview mirror and give her children the time, devotion, and love she had always lacked. My plans for college enrollment changed. Despite the contrary advice of my sister Carrie, my father, and many of my friends, I was determined to start working right out of high school to support us. "You're thinking with your little head, not your big head," my family and friends often said. But because it was absolutely true, I remained deaf. A month before the wedding, my best friend questioned, "Do you think she will settle for just you when you get married? I heard she got that $2K for your wedding entertaining the whole bachelor party." Not only did his words not make me think twice, but they knocked him to the ground after I punched him in the mouth with my fist. I had fallen in love with Janet, so I didn't believe anything bad about her, and nothing could change my mind. Janet's family, living in a trailer, obviously couldn't pay for the wedding, but with the money she and I had from part-time jobs, my father's help, and the $2,000 my friend mentioned Janet supposedly received from some mysterious distant relative, we had a small but nice ceremony and an unpretentious reception. I started working at a car dealership in which my father had a share, the day we returned from our holiday masquerading as a honeymoon, and Janet started working at the bank. For 2 years, things went well. Our life was certainly good, perhaps even better than it had been before the honeymoon. Janet seemed happy, but not content. She began to talk more and more often about material things she would like to have, but which our relatively meager salaries could not afford. She often asked me if my father, whom she thought was rich because of his share in the car dealership, could help us more. I asked Janet about starting a family, but she was adamant. Until we were in a great financial situation, she wasn't going to do it. She had every intention of quitting her job and taking care of her children when we had them. We had been married for almost 2 years when disaster struck me. My father died of a heart attack on the job. I was working as a salesman at a used car dealership when I heard a noise in the service area. I pulled up in time to see my father let out his last breath moments before the paramedics arrived. I was devastated. After my mother's death, he had been my rock. Carrie had just graduated from college a month before and was living at home while she looked for a job. She, too, had a hard time dealing with her father's death, but she is a much stronger person than I am. Janet supported me during the funeral preparations and for several days afterward. She didn't shed tears like Carrie and I did, but she was there for me. But once the dust settled, she started asking more and more about my father's will and when it would be made public. This frustrated me and I told her so, but she kept going anyway. About 2 weeks after Dad died, Janet, Carrie, myself, and an aunt and uncle from out of town went to the reading of the will. I think we were all surprised that Dad's share of the dealership was only 3% and that he had a second mortgage on the house. Apparently, he used the mortgage money to buy his share of the dealership. Ultimately, this meant that after his share was sold to the majority owner at a price we couldn't bargain about and the mortgage on the house was paid off, Carrie and I would each receive about $10,000. Although Janet said nothing, I realized that steam was rising from her ears. That was the end of her compassion and support. She became a different woman after that. I tried my best to rekindle our relationship, but Janet was cold and indifferent. 3 months after the reading of the will, I came home to our rented apartment and found Janet gone and a note lying over a stack of papers. Hi, Alan. I want to have children, but you won't be able to support them the way I want. I'm leaving for greener pastures. I've withdrawn more than half the money from our pathetic bank account as I'm leaving you all the furniture. Don't try to contact me. Call my attorney if you need anything. His name is on the divorce papers under this note. Good luck, Janet. Yes, that's exactly what was under the note. A stack of papers asking for a divorce based on irreconcilable differences. I guess that meant I was not a potential prey, as she thought, and therefore not subject to expungement. I was just the first stepping stone in her trailer life. I tried to contact her, but her attorney insisted she had no interest in communicating with me. My heart was breaking, because I really did love this bitch. How could I not see that she never loved me? Fortunately, Carrie still lived in the city and had a good job. Since I could no longer afford the apartment without Janet's income, I sold the furniture and moved in with her for a short time. Only Carrie kept me from falling into total despondency, and for the next 6 weeks I just went about my normal routine. Then I found out from friends that Janet was now living with a wealthy property developer and wearing maternity clothes. Now I was really angry. I called her lawyer again and demanded to see Janet. Actually, Mr. Easton, I was just about to call you, Janet's lawyer told me. Janet is pregnant and is going to amend her divorce petition to request child support. I was stunned again. I had just signed divorce papers for a no-contest divorce, with the division of our finances that Janet had already worked out, with no alimony either way. In that moment, I was a new man. No more Mr. Nice Guy, I said to myself, clutching at her lawyer. Tell that goddamn whore that if she demands child support, I will immediately demand a paternity test and withdraw my consent to divorce. I've heard there are several methods of determining paternity in the womb. If it turns out to be my child, I'll pay for the test. If not, she'll pay for the test, and I'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery and demand child support and redistribution of our few assets. Got it, asshole! I shouted, hanging up the phone. I never received any official papers asking for alimony because I knew the fetus wasn't mine, but now all my love for Janet was replaced with anger and hatred. When the divorce became final 2 months later, Carrie came home from work and found me drunk and mumbling. Although I was like a fog, I had never seen her so angry. She called me every name imaginable and basically told me to pull myself together and be glad that slut, as she now always called Janet, was out of my life. Carrie then pushed me into the bedroom and, slamming the door shut, shouted, "Don't come out until you sober up." I fell asleep, wallowing in self-pity. When I woke up, I smelled eggs and bacon cooking. Carrie was in the kitchen. I called both of our jobs and told them we wouldn't be in until noon, Carrie said, gesturing for me to sit down and then placing a plate of flavorful food in front of me. Why? I asked. Because we're going to have a conversation, and it's probably going to take me a while to get it through to your thick goddamn skull what you need to do. That's why. Like I said, Carrie was tough. Within 2 hours, Carrie had convinced me that I needed to move at least 500 miles away, that I needed to get at least an associate's degree by attending community college at night, and that I needed to put this bitch behind me, and if I couldn't, I needed to seek professional help. Within a month, I was on my way. I moved to an area of the country where construction was booming, got a job as a handyman, rented an apartment, and enrolled in the local community college, starting taking night classes after 2 months. When my body finally adjusted to manual labor, I found that I actually enjoyed being in better shape than when I played soccer. I also realized that my high school teachers were right to be disappointed in my grades because when I put forth effort like I did in community college, I found that I could be a star. Despite attending night school, I earned an associate degree in civil engineering and business in just 2 school years and 2 summer months. I didn't go on dates. I partied about once a week, though a few times when I found someone to party with. But none of them were in any way comparable to Janet, so they never made me think about her. In fact, I was proud to put her out of my mind. 30 months after I moved, I got a job as a manager at the same construction company where I worked as a laborer. I got to know the foreman very well, and then through him, the owner. They both thought I had talent. My wages were now 4 times what I was making when I moved, and I had managed to save a fair amount of money since my community college tuition was minimal. The weekend after getting my new job, I decided to treat myself by hiring a call girl rather than a prostitute. I found an agency through a buddy of mine who vouched for me with them and chose Desiree, apparently just her stage name, from the photos on the agency's webpage. The price was high, $900 for 3 hours, but I was sure I really deserved it. When Desiree showed up at my apartment at 8 p.m. on Saturday night, she was twice as good in reality as she was in the photos. When Desiree entered the apartment, she closed and locked the door behind her. We scrutinized each other without saying anything other than, "Hi, I'm Desiree," and "Hi, I'm Alan." Surprisingly, it went off without the slightest awkwardness. Next chapter. My 2 happy nights with her presented an unexpected problem. I started thinking about Janet. I thought about how wonderful my life had been back then, and how I had been screwed as badly as anyone I had ever heard of. I was overcome with anger and hatred again. When my friends told me I was being an asshole, I realized what the problem was. My sister Carrie told me that I needed to see a psychologist. Going to a psychologist helped. At least I was able to achieve a balance where I stopped being an asshole with my friends and acquaintances. After I saw the psychologist 3 times the first month and then about once a month for a year, she did an analysis. You have as much anger and hatred in you as any sane patient I've ever had, Alan. I'm afraid that conventional therapeutic procedures will not allow you to release them. Anger and hatred are not good for your health, although you haven't had any adverse effects so far, probably because you remain in great shape, Dr. Bennett told me, looking over her glasses. So there's no hope of me ever getting rid of it? I asked with obvious disappointment in my voice. There has to be some cataclysmic event to put an end to it. You'll only get rid of what you feel for Janet by luck, not by advice. I hope it happens soon. Does that mean it's over between us? I asked, genuinely perplexed. It would be a waste of your money to keep coming to see me every month. You are still my patient, but I recommend that you see me every 6 to 9 months and call me if something urgent arises. I want you to heal completely, because without that, you are unlikely to have a fulfilling relationship. But there is nothing I can do with conventional therapy or medication. Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Bennett, I said, standing up and extending my hand. I'll see you in 6 to 9 months if I don't have a crisis, I grinned. Good luck, she said, smiling and shaking my hand. It had been 9 years since I left my hometown when I had the chance to return. I was still young in my 29 years, but I had advanced in my company to the point where I was being considered for a new branch of the company in my hometown. The only upside would be being able to see Carrie. I was still plagued by memories too painful to bear, and though the anger and hatred hadn't dissipated, I controlled it. My boss had insisted that I at least look for a branch location in my hometown, even if I ended up refusing to be the one to open a branch there. Since this would allow me to see Carrie on her home turf, her wedding 6 years earlier had been a destination wedding, and she and or her husband Jeff would come to visit me or meet at some vacation spot about once every 6 months. And since I didn't have to commit to moving back, I agreed. When I talked to Carrie, she insisted that I tell her about Janet so I wouldn't be surprised. When the real estate market crashed, Janet dumped the realtor dude just like she dumped me. So exactly that she was pregnant with her second daughter when she left him for a hedge fund manager. Now she was Janet Jenkins, oddly enough, still married to her third husband, hedge fund manager Kevin Jenkins, and was a single mom with daughters ages 6 and 8. The older daughter was adopted by Kevin Jenkins, and the second was his biological daughter. I was glad Carrie told me about this for two reasons. I wasn't the only brat Janet had adopted, and I hated the realtor dude for taking her away from me. I rented a car at the airport. It felt very strange, since there had been a lot of physical improvements there in the last 9 years, and went to look at a few properties. I planned to meet Carrie and her husband Jeff at their house to stay with them until I found something suitable. I hadn't driven more than 20 miles, still 5 miles from the first house I was supposed to look at when I got a flat tire. I called the rental company and it would take them an hour to get a man out to me, so I changed the tire myself. I forgot to pack the wrench with the rest of my supplies, so I threw it on the floor in front of the front passenger seat and hit the road. I stopped at a stoplight as the kids were coming out of a private school. I saw 3 cute little girls in school uniforms crossing the street and about to get into a limo. The driver held the back door open for them as all hell broke loose. A black SUV pulled up. 3 guys jumped out of it, hit the driver in the head, and grabbed the screaming girls, their backpacks flying around. The bandits were in the SUV with the 3 girls in the back seat before the light even turned green. I didn't hesitate. I sped through the light, avoiding one car in the intersection, and rammed the SUV. My airbag deployed, and so did the SUV driver's airbag, but he wasn't wearing his seatbelt and, stunned, groaned in the front seat as the airbag deflated. I grabbed a wrench, unbuckled the seatbelt, jumped out of the car, and ran to the SUV that had stopped. A guy with a gun got out of the passenger side of the back seat, but he was unsteady, and by the time he fired, I was on top of him. I hit him over the head with the wrench, causing him to collapse to the ground. The third thug climbed out of the driver's side of the back seat, put a knife to the throat of one of the petrified little girls, and ordered me to drop my weapon. I looked at him calmly and then said loudly and clearly, "If you let the girl go, I will let you leave. However, you will not move from this spot with her. If you harm her, I will crush your testicles before I kill you. You have 10 seconds to make a decision, and then I will come for you." With those words, I raised my left hand, looked at my watch, and started counting. 1, 2. When I got to 6, he let go of the crying girl and rushed off running. I threw the wrench at him and felt like Daniel Boone when I saw it hit him in the back of the head and knocked him to the ground. I walked over to him, put my knee on his back, and called to the stunned people from the school across the street to call 911. Apparently, someone had already called, as the cops arrived 2 minutes later. When the cops arrived, 2 male teachers from the school were holding the driver of the SUV, who was still moaning as he lay on his stomach, and 5 or 6 parents of other children or other teachers from the school were comforting 3 frightened little girls. The police quickly arrested all 3 thugs. All were loaded into ambulances while I was treated for a gunshot wound to my left arm that I didn't know I had until one of the teachers pointed out the blood to me. The bandit with the gun was down and probably dying. The other 2 were wounded and bleeding, but the wounds were not life-threatening. The limo driver was also treated at the scene. As the ambulances drove away and I was giving my statement to the police lieutenant and the paramedic was finishing treating my wound, I heard the hysterical crying of a woman running toward the 2 kidnapped girls screaming, "Mommy, Mommy." I took 2 breaths when I got a good look at her. Damn Janet. Janet saw me. After the initial shock, she ran up to me screaming, "You bloody bastard, Alan! I know you had something to do with this. I know you kidnapped my girls to get back at me, you piece of shit. Before I or the cops could react, she was on top of me. She hit me twice in the head with her purse before I could get out of the way, and the cop grabbed her. This guy saved your children's lives, lady, the cop yelled as he held her down. She didn't listen and kept swearing at me. In the distance, I saw the policeman finally calm her down, and the little girls ran to her as I got into the lieutenant's car to finish giving my statement at the police station. Having watched cop shows on TV, I knew enough to insist that my statement be videotaped. The main question the cops had was how I had gotten the wrench so quickly. Since my rental car was already in the impound lot, it was easy for them to verify my story. After my statement, they asked me to stick around, which I agreed to, only to call my sister. Carrie was shocked and agreed to pick me up. I told the cops, "My sister will be here in half an hour, so I'm leaving." "We need you to stay a while longer," the lieutenant said. "I won't stay unless you arrest me, and if you do, you'll figure in my false arrest lawsuit," I barked at him. He noticed the change in my demeanor from cooperative to hostile and didn't insist. "I need one more thing, though," I told him. "I want an arrest warrant for that crazy bitch who hit me with her purse." "She was just an upset mom," the lieutenant replied. "She assaulted me, and I'm pressing charges. Either you give me a form to fill out, or I go to the press tomorrow morning and ask the commissioner why you're not taking action against the one who assaulted me." By the time I filled out the form, Carrie was already waiting. I took my suitcase from the police officers, they had obviously searched it, and left, receiving a long hug from Carrie. Of course, the story of the solved kidnapping at the private school was the lead story on the TV news that night and a headline in the newspaper the next day. Fortunately, the press was unable to locate me, as Carrie and I had different last names. However, it seemed that one reporter or another had talked to everyone involved in the situation. The next day, I went to see a lawyer to sue Janet for defamation and assault, and to see if he could verify that the cops had arrested her for assault. He was very happy to help his new high-profile client. In the afternoon, I went about my business. Everyone was talking about the rescue, but no one recognized me and I kept my mouth shut. Everything changed that night. One of the TV stations worked quickly and got copies of the security footage from the security cameras at the business and the street camera, although apparently the school didn't give them a copy of their footage, which was the clearest. They blew up a picture of me as my wound was being treated and said many flattering words about my performance and bravery. It was hard to do business as usual that day, as I was recognized and people were dying to spread the word. One reporter learned of my whereabouts and soon they too began to avoid me. I gave short, terse interviews, downplaying my role. Somehow Janet found my sister's number. I didn't think she knew her married last name. She called her house, seeking me out to apologize for going off the chain, to thank me for saving her children, and to ask to meet me. At least that's what Carrie said in Janet's voicemail message. I never listened to it, told Carrie to delete it, and told Carrie that if Janet called and she answered to back off. The next day, before flying back to the office, I met with my new attorney again. He had all the papers ready for my lawsuit against Janet for slander and assault. I read them, signed them, and gave the attorney the retainer. My lawyer also informed me that he had spoken to the prosecutor's office, reminded them of how high-profile the case was, and asked about Janet's arrest and prosecution. He was told they were looking into the matter and would get back to him. As I flew home, I was very pleased with myself. I am ashamed to admit it, but I was thinking more about being able to sue Janet and the fact that she now owed me a great deal than I was about saving the 3 little girls. Now my anger and hatred had a healthy outlet. When I returned to my office and told my boss about the 2 lucrative jobs I'd managed to find, he was pleased. Of course, the news of my antics got a big response in my city as well, and everyone around me congratulated me. The first day after my return, my boss, the owner of the company, and his wife took me out to lunch at the nicest restaurant in town, where I discovered once again that I had become a bit of a celebrity. I enjoyed my 15 minutes of fame. When I returned to my office after lunch, I received a phone call. "Mr. Easton, this is Bradley Simmons. said the distinguished voice on the other end of the phone. Bradley Simmons is a billionaire entrepreneur, considered one of the 25 richest men in America. Yes, and I'm pretty sure you're calling me from the White House with the Pope and the Dalai Lama next to you, I grinned. No. Who is this really? I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, Mr. Easton, but one of the little girls you rescued earlier this week is my granddaughter Elsie, and I'm calling to thank you and to tell you the good news. If you're joking, it's a cruel joke, I said. I assure you it's not a joke, and after we talk, I'll give you a way to confirm it. As he spoke, I became convinced that it was indeed Bradley Simmons. I asked him to call me Alan, and he asked me to call him Brad. He was genuinely grateful to me, at one point telling me that his 8-year-old granddaughter Elsie was the apple of his eye and that she would probably be ransomed, but would probably be killed whether he paid or not, as the kidnappers had a police record rife with violent crimes. He ended our phone conversation with some very good news. Alan, I owe you a big debt, and I'm paying my debts. If you ever need my help, whether it's a job, a recommendation, a trip to Europe, call it what you want, just give me a call and it's in your hands. My secretary will email you my personal cell phone number. All I ask is that you don't give it to anyone else. That's very nice of you, Brad, and I can assure you I'll guard it for the rest of my life, I replied. One more thing. Don't worry about your rental car that you used to save my granddaughter's life. She's already been taken care of. I was sure that I would have to pay for the rental car I wrecked, or that my insurance rates would go up, even if I only had to pay the deductible. I called the number for the rental car company that Brad had given me and was shocked to learn that it was the president's office. When I gave the receptionist my name, I was immediately connected to her. Hello, Mr. Easton. This is Catherine Timms, the president of XYZ Company. I want to tell you personally that we are very proud of what you have accomplished, and for the first time that I can recall, we are pleased that one of our machines was wrecked. I want to assure you that not only will you not be charged anything related to the damage to the car, but that we have refunded your rental money to your credit card. I was stunned, and after muttering a few thank yous, I decided to satisfy my curiosity. I guess Mr. Bradley Simmons had nothing to do with it, I said. Timms laughed. Actually, Brad's holding company owns XYZ, and it was he who brought your situation to my attention, though of course I've seen videos of your exploits on TV. However, even if you hadn't saved Brad's granddaughter, I assure you we would have done exactly the same thing. Thank you, I replied. Like I said, we're proud that you were able to use one of our cars for your heroics. Besides, our marketing department told anyone who would listen that it was one of our cars, she said, laughing even harder now. We'll probably get free publicity for 100 times the value of the car. I had a very good week. Now, Carrie told me that Janet kept calling her and sending her letters, which Carrie didn't open but just returned. Finally, Carrie answered the phone instead of leaving a message. After making sure the caller ID was accurate, she yelled into the receiver, "Stop contacting me, you goddamn bitch! Alan will never, ever, ever, ever contact you except through his lawyers. If you call again, I'll have his lawyers file a harassment suit against your whore." Apparently, Janet made no attempt to contact her after that. She did, however, repeatedly contact my attorney to request a meeting. He told her that everything would be handled in a formal proceeding. While I enjoyed putting the screws to Janet, it started to get expensive. I knew I would have to go to a deposition in the case I was suing for, and my attorney told me that Janet had the right to attend the deposition, although he could make sure I never had to talk to her. As I was contemplating what day would be most convenient for me to attend the deposition, the phone rang. "It's Mr. Simmons!" my secretary exclaimed excitedly. "Wow," I thought, gathering my wits. "Hey, Brad, how are you doing?" I asked. "Great, Alan, and you?" "Well, aside from my litigation with my ex-wife, things are great. Even that's great since I'm putting the screws to her, but I don't like what it's costing me. I have to go to a deposition and I'm trying to set a date," I rambled. "Really, yeah," Brad said. I suddenly felt uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Brad. I didn't mean to snap at you. It's just that your call rang just as I was going over my schedule," I continued. "Well, Alan, we're having a little serendipity here. I'm calling to tell you that the mayor wants to have a ceremony to honor you with the City Hero of the Year award. You can time it to coincide with your testimony and get reimbursed for travel, Brad said enthusiastically. I'm not big on publicity, Brad. I've turned down dozens of interview requests, including from 60 Minutes. But I can't believe the city will pay my travel expenses anyway. Ha ha ha, good point, Brad laughed. I've got to be honest. I will pay your travel expenses, but because the ceremony is very important to my granddaughter. Elsie insists that she wants to make a public speech thanking you, and I think it's good for both her development and healing her trauma, so I'm begging you to come. God, Brad, I really don't want to turn you down, but I'm wary of it. I really don't like to draw attention to myself. It would be very embarrassing for me. Brad interrupted me. I understand, Alan, but here's the thing. If you come, I'll not only pay your travel expenses, but I'll also pay the attorney's fees for your lawsuit against your ex-wife, and I'll owe you double. I assure you, the fact that I will owe you twice as much will be very favorable to you. I thought for a while, probably longer than I'd been thinking since Brad said, Are you here, Alan? I'm sorry, Brad. I was just thinking about it. Actually, you've made it impossible to refuse, but you really don't have to pay my attorney fees. I'll come to the ceremony. Fine, but I want to pay for your lawyer. I resent her treating you this way. I didn't know you had filed a lawsuit, but now that I know, I want to help. My secretary will give you instructions to give to your attorney and provide you with the expected dates for the ceremony. I look forward to seeing you, Alan, Brad said. Thank you, Brad, I replied cheerfully. Life was getting better. My lawyer was the happiest guy I'd ever talked to when he called to tell me that Brad Simmons was taking care of all the expenses. His personal attorney told me to go all out and spare no expense as part of my ethical requirements. I'm sure my attorney has seen his bills just double. No doubt he'll get it. The day before the ceremony, my attorney's office took a statement from me. As expected, Janet Jenkins was present. She tried to talk to me many times, and each time I did something very adult-like, covering my ears with my hands, while my attorney asked her not to talk to me. Finally, my attorney said to opposing counsel, If your client tries to talk to mine one more time, I will stop the deposition, and you can explain to the judge why it should continue under these circumstances. Janet left the room in tears. I smiled broadly. The ceremony was awkward, but it was also exciting to meet Brad in person. His granddaughter Elsie's thank you speech was the most charming I'd ever seen in my life and brought tears to my eyes. Everything was perfect, right to the end. After the ceremony, I chatted with various people while holding my award in my hand. When I had just finished talking to the mayor and turned to leave, behind me stood Janet, Janet's second husband, and Janet's current husband, Kevin Jenkins. I didn't even realize they were there. I was shocked enough that Janet blurted out, Alan, I really want to thank you for saving my girls, and I interrupted her. Facing her, I said in a lowered voice, Screw you, Janet. If I had known they were your kids, I never would have saved them. And then turned to leave. I felt great, as that was the cruelest comment I could have made to her. That is, I felt fine until I saw her daughters standing off to the side with faces so shocked and sad that it was clear they had heard my comment. That's when I felt like crap. The fact that two innocent little girls between the ages of 6 and 9 had heard my comment, which was not true, but only meant to hurt Janet as much as possible, really bothered me. I was still thinking about it and how to remedy the situation 4 days later when my lawyer called. 2 things. Good news about the judgment and a settlement offer from opposing counsel, he said. Shoot, I replied. The judge ruled that we can present evidence of how Janet left you with someone else's baby in her womb in our damages report. That's a big advantage, and it's going to back them up big time. Great, I replied. As for the settlement offer, it was likely influenced by both the court's evidentiary ruling and your stubborn unwillingness to even talk to Janet or her second and third husbands. They have offered to pay $500,000 to drop the case, without admitting liability, and if you drop the criminal assault case still pending against Janet. You should accept. You will never get that amount in court, even with punitive damages, my attorney said. My wheels began to spin. I have a counteroffer, I said. I'll accept the amount and drop the criminal case, but Janet must admit that her comments were defamatory and untrue. A confession of assault doesn't bother me. The most important thing is that I get a 15-minute face-to-face meeting with her two daughters at the courthouse. Neither she nor her second or third husbands can be present. Only their attorney, you, me, and the two girls, and the adults on their side must agree to make no attempt to talk to me. They must also agree to allow you to talk to the girls alone for 10 minutes each year until they turn 18. If they don't agree to all of these conditions or make a single remark questioning my motivation for seeing the girls, we'll go to court. I don't know what you're thinking, but okay. You're the boss. He grinned. My lawyer called me back 2 hours later. They agreed and suggested a meeting date. As soon as I confirmed the meeting date, I called Brad on his cell phone. Brad, this is Alan Easton. You said I could call you on your cell phone, so I'm calling. I hope I haven't bothered you. Alan, I owe you twice as much, so even if you were bothering me, which you're not, I'd like to talk to you. By the way, my granddaughter had the nicest experience of her life at the ceremony, and she was very impressed with the tears in your eyes, you softy. Thanks, Brad. She's a gem, laughed I. I explained to Brad what I wanted to do at the meeting with Janet's girls. For that, Brad was to wire me $400,000, which I would pay back as soon as I received payment from Janet. Wow, you're better than I thought, and I already had a lot of respect for you, Brad replied sincerely. Of course I'll do it. My assistant will wire the money to your business attorney. Have him draw up the paperwork. Thanks, Brad. We're even, I said. That doesn't even count as one of my two debts, and you better get them both, or I'll have to do something to embarrass you, he grinned. Janet and Kevin Jenkins watched anxiously as the lawyer escorted her two daughters, Elizabeth and Jamie Jenkins, ages 9 and 7, into the empty jury room at the courthouse. I smiled warmly as the girls entered, shook their hands, showed them a trick I'd been practicing for a week to get them in the right mood, and then told them why I wanted to meet them. I wanted to tell you both to your face that I am very proud that I had the opportunity to help you with the kidnappers. I know you heard me say something untrue to your mother, and I wanted to make things right, I said as I sat down and took each of them by the hand. Isn't that what you meant when you said you wouldn't have saved us if you knew who our mother was? Asked Elizabeth, starting to smile. No, no, no. That's not what I meant. You two are precious, wonderful children, and whoever your parents are, I would be proud to help you at any time. However, I really dislike your mom for what she has done to me in the past, and I said what I did just to hurt her for the way she has hurt me in the past. But I would give my life to save you too. Why don't you like our mother? Asked Elizabeth, pushing back her beautiful strawberry blonde hair that covered one of her sparkling blue eyes. It's not something I have to worry you about. You just need to know that it has nothing to do with the both of you, I replied as warmly as possible. After that, the conversation flowed easily. Time flew, 15 minutes expired, and I asked Janet's attorney for another 5 minutes. He agreed. Girls, to show you how happy I am to have had the honor of helping you, I am giving each of you a gift. Mr. Ames, my attorney, has enough money so that you both can pay for your college education, no matter what happens to your parents. If you ever need money for anything college-related, just give him a call and he will take care of it for you. Here are 2 of his business cards for you. Mr. Ames will call you on this day every year until you graduate from college to see if you need money and how you are doing. My friend Elsie told me that college costs a lot of money, Elizabeth said, eyes wide. Yes, it does. That's why I'm giving Mr. Ames the money, so you both can go no matter what happens. Both girls hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. There was a tear in Elizabeth's eyes. One more thing. Here are matching rings for us. One I've already given to your friend Elsie. They should show that we have an eternal friendship because I have helped you and you have helped me by giving me more joy than I could ever imagine, having had the honor of helping you, I said. With those words, I put a multicolored plastic ring on the ring finger of each of their right hands, even though it was too big for them, and put another, identical, ring on the pinky finger of their right hand. They smiled, gave me another hug and kiss, and left the room. Janet's lawyer was stunned. He almost fell over when he looked at his copy of the trust agreements that allocated $200,000 to each of the girls to be doubled in 10 years and placed in trust for their education, with the balance going to them upon graduation from college. I was a little flustered, so my attorney and I sat in the jury room for about 5 more minutes before getting up and leaving. When we left, it was clear that Janet's attorney had explained to her and her husband what had happened, and she was sobbing on the verge of fainting. To any normal person, this would mean that she was stunned by my generosity and knew that although I hated her, I loved her children very much. Whether those were really her emotions, I'll never know, because I simply walked away, waving my hand lightly at Elizabeth and Jamie. Right after my 42nd birthday, I moved back to my hometown. In the 12 years since I had settled my lawsuit against Janet, I had seen my therapist once a year, by which time she said that my hatred and anger toward Janet was completely under control. However, I was still not in a serious relationship. This bothered my psychiatrist, but she had no solution other than the possibility of some happy accident that would help me get over this last hurdle. I had been working for Brad Simmons on special projects for the past 11 years and was very close to becoming a wealthy man myself. Now Brad was insisting that I open a business for him in my hometown. Since I no longer had the fear of meeting Janet that I had 12 years ago, I looked forward to it because I could see Carrie, Jeff, and my sweet 11 and 9-year-old nephews and nieces much more often. As part of the procedure for setting up a new business, I hired a PR firm. A 22-year-old woman named Betsy Destino was assigned to me. At first, I was discouraged that they had assigned such a young person, fresh out of college, to my position, although the president of the PR firm assured me that she was the best person for the job and that he would replace her if I wasn't happy. When I met Betsy, I was shocked. At first, she seemed familiar, but I soon realized that I couldn't have seen anyone like her before. She was the most beautiful living woman I had ever seen in my life, aside from Janet and Desiree. She had long blonde hair, sparkling azure eyes, a upturned nose, full lips, a body like out of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition magazine, and she was the epitome of a cheerful and friendly demeanor. Betsy was also a hard worker and had great ideas. I spent more time with her than I should have because I was just fascinated by her, but the company got off to a great start as a result. Almost every day I asked myself, why couldn't I have met someone like her when I was 21? Her habit of touching my arm when she laughed almost made me put cream in my pants. When her 3-month contract with the PR firm ended, it was a sad day for me. I would have liked to keep her on the job, but her company had other plans for her, and I couldn't justify it if Brad asked me about it. As Betsy and I said our goodbyes in my office, she shook me to my core. Now that I no longer work for you, you could take me out to dinner and a play, she said, looking me in the eye like a cobra. Well, stammered I. Before I could answer anything, she hugged me tightly, whispered in my ear, "Call me or I'll haunt you," and then, parting her lips, slipped a piece of paper with her cell phone number into my hand. That evening, I invited myself over to Carrie's house for dinner. The kids were happy to see me and the gifts I brought them. "Stop spoiling them!" Carrie chided as they ran around the house holding their latest treasures from Uncle Al. After dinner, as Jeff was putting the kids to bed, Carrie said, "What's up? I know that look. You want to talk." "Yes, I do," was all I said as we walked hand in hand into the living room. Carrie was the only person on earth I trusted to be completely honest with me. Our love for each other was so deep that nothing could break it, allowing us to be frank. I told her about Betsy for the first time, even showing her a picture. "I think I've seen this woman, but I can't locate her," she said, with a perplexed expression on her face. "She's obviously a 10 by the looks of her. And her character matches her appearance." I picked up on that. Then I told her what Betsy had told me and showed her a piece of paper with her phone number and a little heart on it. "Carrie, tell me honestly, is it possible that this woman finds me attractive? I'm more than 20 years older than she is, and she could probably get almost any hetero guy she wants." Carrie looked at me intently. Then she replied seriously, "Alan, you're good looking, in great shape and well off. It's a possibility. True, the odds are still less than 50-50, but it's worth a try. In fact, I'd say if you don't try, you're pretty damn stupid. Just don't lead with your chin and keep your expectations realistic every day. I smiled, stood up, lifted Carrie to her feet, and gave her a big hug and kiss. Carrie, you are the best. Thanks for the food. I need to make a personal call. I walked out of the house to Carrie's laughter as she closed the door behind me. When I went on my date with Betsy that Saturday night, I was nervous as hell. Within 5 minutes, she had me in the right mood with her smile, sparkling eyes, casual conversation, and touch. Lots of touching. We had a great dinner. The conversation flowed as if we were old friends. She held my hand for most of the game. As we were driving home, she put her hand on my thigh and said, "How about we spend the evening at your condo?" Her look could have melted steel. When we entered my condo, we immediately flew to my bed. The next 14 months were the best of my life. Although Betsy periodically reminded me that we weren't exclusive and that if she ever got engaged, our relationship would end, she was the most loving, most beautiful, aggressive, sparkling woman in history. She was a virtual goddess. Betsy usually went on dates on Fridays and Saturdays, and sometimes went on weekend trips out of town. We almost never talked about her other lovers. We went to dinners, plays, charity events, and even one 3-day weekend at the most expensive resort in the East. I felt so good and was so satisfied with my life that I started dating too. I found several women 5 years younger and 5 years older that I enjoyed being with. I never tried to compare them to Betsy, as that would be extremely unfair to them. Thursday night, Betsy sat me up in bed and said, "We need to talk." "Okay," I said, taking her hands in mine and noticing for the first time the ring on her right pinky finger. It was too dark to make out what it looked like. "You've heard me mention Eric? And you met him once, right?" she asked. I'd run into Betsy and the 6-foot blonde man she introduced as Eric one Saturday night at a restaurant when I was with a date, and Betsy sometimes talked about him. "Sure," I replied, realizing where this was going. "Well, he proposed to me. I'm in love with him and I intend to say yes to him on Monday," she said, looking me in the eye. "If you're in love with him, why haven't you told him yes already?" I asked with a lump in my throat. Because I told you when I first started a relationship with you that once I got engaged, our relationship would be over, and I want to have one last fling with you. I want to take you to a resort this weekend so you can properly say goodbye to me." "Wow," I replied, completely stunned. "That would be great, but you don't have to treat," I said when she interrupted me. "I will treat. I have plenty of money. However, I need to fully open your eyes first, so don't say yes just yet," she said. Betsy then turned on the bedside lamp and brought her little finger up to my face. The light from the lamp highlighted a plastic, multicolored ring. My mind was in turmoil when she said, "I'm Elizabeth Jenkins. Destino is the Italian word for fate, and I only use the pseudonym for business." Never in my life have I been so at a loss for words. Emotions took over my mind and body, and all I could do was stare at her with my mouth open. She realized I couldn't speak and continued. "I never got the chance to properly thank you for saving my life and my sister Jamie's life. I was obsessed with the fact that you not only saved me, but you gave me a trust fund of $200,000. I had to know about you." I noticed tears in each of her eyes, and mine became moist as well. "When I was a teenager, I got a transcript of your testimony from your attorney, taking a promise from him to never tell you. When I saw how my mother treated you, I was shocked and embarrassed. It was then that I decided to never, ever be like her. Even though she truly loved and loved me, and did her best to raise my sister and me, I have never been able to look at her the same way since," Betsy Elizabeth continued. Gasping slightly, Betsy said, "I decided to make amends for treating you so badly, so I decided to have some fun with you. I discovered that you are a wonderful man and lover, and have continued to do so both for my own satisfaction and as a token of my gratitude, and have tried never to mislead you about our long-term prospects." Finally, I spoke up. "You're incredible," was all I could mutter as I hugged her tightly. After a few seconds, Betsy pushed me away, wiped away my tears, and said, "Does this mean you'll go away with me for the weekend and let me pay off some of the more than $300,000 I have left from the trust you set up for me?" "You've given me the greatest gift a person can give," I told her, coming to my senses a little. "You gave so much of yourself that you turned my life around. There is no more hate and anger in my heart, only love and peace. I would be honored to spend one last weekend with the most inwardly and outwardly beautiful person in the world." That Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning were the most bittersweet days of my life. I was not outwardly melancholy, even though I had to admit that I was in love with Betsy. It was because I was so happy for her and grateful to her. True to her word, Betsy never made contact with me again after she accepted Eric's marriage proposal, although we remained very good friends. She even introduced me to my fiancée, C.E. Grace, a widow 2 years younger than me, who is the executive director of the charity organization where Betsy worked. I saw no need to tell Grace anything about Janet since she was no longer a part of my life now. Grace and I attended Betsy and Eric's wedding 9 months after Betsy accepted Eric's proposal. Of course, I knew I would see Janet there, but since I no longer had any hate or anger in me, I had no misgivings. It was a beautiful ceremony and a rousing reception, and I was overwhelmed with joy for Betsy. At the reception, I noticed that Janet was avoiding me. I'm sure she was certain I would bite her head off again if she tried to speak to me. Just before Grace and I left, however, I tracked Janet down. She was shocked when I approached her, having interrupted a conversation with one of her friends, and was clearly preparing for trouble. "Janet," I said, looking her straight in the eye and holding both of her hands, "I must commend you for raising the most remarkable woman in history. Elizabeth has no equal. I am sure she could never have become the fantastic person she is if you had not been her loving mother. Good luck to you." With those words, I turned around and headed towards Grace, leaving Janet in complete silence and stillness. As I approached Grace, she said, "I think Betsy's mom wanted to say something to you. She was holding out her hand as you were leaving, and I think I saw her say, 'I'm sorry.'" What could she have been apologizing for? "I don't know, dear," I answered Grace, quickly ushering her out of the ballroom. "Maybe she thinks I didn't like the wedding cake." The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.